Good afternoon all, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Defending Save the Children from High Levels of Cyber Attacks. I'm Stuart, and I'll be your host this afternoon. I work here at Charity Digital as part of the operations team as a client account specialist. I'm joined today by Sasha running our back of house. So if you run into any problems, please pop a comment into the chat and we'll do our best to get that sorted for you. Today's webinar is going to focus on two main areas: the security risks and challenges specific to charities, and how Save the Children consolidated their cybersecurity. First, we will be joined by Etienne Grief, the CEO of Flow Communications. Etienne is one of the early pioneers of the information security industry. He has spent over 20 years promoting the innovative use of technology and services to solve complex customer issues. With Etienne, we will be learning about the different layers of the internet, the cybercrime ecosystem, and learn how cybercriminals make their money. We will then be joined by Steve Nerton from FSecure and Cristian Alfaro from Save the Children International. Steve is a senior technical account manager with over 20 years experience of pre-sales experience in the security industry. Steve's aim is to provide valuable guidance to new and existing FSecure customers to ensure their ongoing resilience. Cristian is an enterprise technology manager with over 18 years experience in the IT sector. His professional focus pertains to infrastructure, network and endpoint management, and the humanitarian response sector. Together, they are going to take us through a case study focusing on the needs and challenges of protecting over 17,000 endpoints in over 300 locations worldwide. We should have some time at the end of the session for questions for today's speakers, so please pop them into the Q&A function found towards the bottom of your screen. It would be great to get the chat going, so feel free to pop down what organization you're from, where you're currently based. You can do this in chat, also found at the bottom of the screens. Closed captions are available. Just hit the CC button. If you have any issues with that, please just raise it in the chat and we'll do our best to help you out. We are recording this session and the recording will be available to you in about a week's time. You'll be notified by email once it's available for you to watch again, as well as any of the slides and resources mentioned in this session. Well, I'm going to now hand you over to Etienne. Etienne, over to you.
Thanks very much, Stuart. I'm just sorting out my the PowerPoint and my video, and we'll be going. So thanks very much for that very kind introduction, Stuart. So as Stuart said, I'm one of the early pioneers. In fact, I looked back yesterday, and the very first time I got involved in cybersecurity was in 1994, when I installed this thing called the firewall, which was a foreign concept to me. And I thought, you know what, this internet thing may have legs. And I was one of those few people that consciously chose to get into the space. And you know what? It's been an interesting journey. It's a fantastic journey. And it's a journey that's been extremely rewarding, challenging at times, frustrating very often, but ultimately rewarding. So as Stuart said, let's just look at the agenda. I do want to start off by looking at some terminology, because I think in our industry, very often people use terminology loose and fast, and it helps to be specific at times. Then I do want to look at some elements of the cybercrime ecosystem, just to understand how that all works together, because ultimately, once we understand that, it perhaps puts us in a better position to defend ourselves. Now, of course, as most law enforcement people tell you, if you want to really, really get to the bottom of crime and stop crime, follow the money. And I think it's also important to understand what people's motivations are, how they make money, and what the rewards are for the different forms of activity. So I do look at that, the money element of cybercrime too. Then, of course, I will conclude, because I think it's always dangerous to just talk about the bad stuff, talk about how difficult it is and how much money's been made without actually saying, this is what I think this means, and this is what I think you can do to protect yourself. And which then very nicely leads us into the Save the Children case study, with Cristian and Stephen. So, and then after that, I think we'll do joint recommendations between the panelists on the presentation, of course, and followed by Q&A. So please do feel free to ask questions. Very happy to take those questions and to answer them. Okay, so let's start off with some terminology. Now, very often the internet is described as an iceberg, where a lot of it is visible, but actually there's a bigger part of it that's not visible. The first part that we all are very aware of and we use all the time is the normal internet that you access using browsers like Google and Microsoft Edge, Netscape, other browsers exist, Safari, so forth. And that's searchable, that's indexable, so you can search for information. Below that, and actually a much bigger part of it, 80% of the internet is something called the deep web. Now, the deep web isn't very different to the internet. All it means is behind a portal of some description where you have to put in a username, a password. So it doesn't come up on the search engines, and you need to know where you want to go to, and then, of course, have credentials to go into this forum. And then lastly, we have the dark web. And traditionally, when you talk about the dark web, you have to lower your voice, the dark web, because this is where really criminal things go on. This is not specifically indexable, searchable, and almost certainly you can't use a normal browser to access it. And I'll talk about that a little bit. What I would say now, before I get into the rest of my presentation, I often feel that the whole concept of the dark web is overblown. It's overhyped. It's often used to, in this fear, uncertainty, and doubt scenario. Most of the nefarious activity that goes on is on the deep web. It's on the normal internet, It's simpler, it's easier, and the technology is much more friendly for nefarious needs. But I'll describe that and go into a bit more detail. So first of all, if I talk about the dark web here, I interchangeably mean the dark web and the deep web. While the deep and dark web may be unregulated and and unstructured, and like the Wild West, the activities that carry on within these areas are certainly not unstructured. They're extremely structured. They're very specific, and they are actually set up like a business. They have a business model. If I look at a lot of the forums and we spend our time trying to understand what goes on within these parts of the internet, it's run like a business. The people transacting on the deep web or on the dark web have chief revenue officers. They've got VPs of customer success. They have help desk people. They've got rating systems. They actually want to make sure that this is productive for the activities. So, there's some interesting things about this area where people will transact, and I'll talk about what gets transacted later. But an interesting thing is like an escrow service, because there's no honor amongst thieves. So how do I make sure that if I transact with somebody I don't know, I don't trust, I get the service I need? So let's say I've developed a new exploit that exploits a vulnerability that's not known, a 0-day, so to speak. Okay. Now this 0-day is worth a lot of money. Now, of course, I want to get a lot of money for this, but the minute that I give the exploit to the person buying it, they don't need to give me the money anymore because they've got the exploit. And conversely, the person buying this exploit, if he gives me money first and I give him a duff exploit that doesn't work, he's out of pocket. And this is a deep web and nobody knows who's anybody else. So that's kind of difficult. So what you have is you have escrow brokers. And how this works is that you deposit your money with the escrow agent. The person selling the exploit gives the exploit to the escrow agent. The escrow agent will verify that it works. And only once they verify that it works and they verify that the money is legit, well, not legit, the money is there, it's real, it's available, they'll then send the money to the exploit developer and send the exploit to the person that bought it. So a very sophisticated business model that works very, very well. Now, of course, it's very well protected from outside and law enforcement agencies because people do not want law enforcement or security companies to be part of these forums. And how do they do it? They do it via introductions, like the best clubs in the world. They do it by using cultural references that isn't easily understood outside the area where you might be using this. And they might very often charge a vetting fee or entrance fee to get part of this because they know that that's quite difficult for law enforcement to do. And a lot of it is in Russian and other languages that maybe aren't as well understood in the traditional West. So very structured, very specific, and actually run like a business. Now, the thing that we often hear about when we think about the dark web is this thing called Tor, the onion router, which is a piece of software which allows you to surf stuff anonymously. Now, first of all, the first thing to say is that this was developed for legitimate purposes. The American Navy developed Tor, so when they were in theater and they wanted to research something or search for something, they didn't want the local internet service providers controlled by local governments to see what they were surfing, what they were looking at. So they created this thing called Tor. Now, Tor is used to access the dark web, but actually also really importantly, Tor is also used to access the normal web. So it's really just an anonymizing piece of software which allows you to access the unindexable part of the internet or the indexable or the deep web part of the internet. So it's just a tool. The Tor in its own right, it's not the dark web, it's just a mechanism to get to the normal internet or to the deep or dark web. And now, of course, when we think about the dark web and deep web, what we often focus on is this whole threat. The people talk about people buying hitman on the dark web, or 3D printed plastic guns, that will go through metal detectors without, being picked up. And the reality is, those are mostly stings, to be honest. And also, hackers are bullies very often. They love attracting people into these forums on the dark web, on not so well disguised areas of the dark web, which is known, and to sell them stuff, sell them an exploit that they can use to spy on somebody. And actually, this exploit is something to hack the noob, as I call them, newbie. So I think one has to be quite careful in terms of how one differentiates between the hype and the stuff that's actually real, that's monetizable, which I'll get onto next. So, as I said already, cybercrime operations nowadays are organized like normal business. They have structures, they have specializations, like in business, the accountant doesn't do law, doesn't do sales, doesn't do everything. Cybercrime operations have now become very, very specialized. You have people that look after developing exploits. You have people that sell access to systems. You have people that help you deliver that exploit. In other words, craft the phishing emails. You have people that actually brings it all together, like the hackers will actually use these different techniques to do it. You have the people that will control different devices once they've been compromised and will sell that access to, let's say, a ransomware gang that's looking for a particular sector like the charity. So they are absolutely organized. And of course, to work and succeed within this ecosystem, you need to have great customer service. I was reading a recent indictment, from a ransomware indictment in the US. That's what I do over weekends, read criminal indictments, which you can get access to if you pay a fee to the US court service. And in this ransomware gang, there were 3 VPs. There was 2 VP of development, there was a product manager, there was a customer success officer. And, and the scary thing about this gang is they pay 20% more than traditional businesses did for the skill. So now there's a war on talent, but not just for legitimate purposes, but also for using the same talent for maybe more nefarious purposes. So, as I said, I already talked about this already, these threats, very often the bit that we hear about in the dark web is a little bit sensationalist. It's not really real. It's about just getting some column inches, but actually in most cases it stings, and it's not really the things we should concern about. The bits we should concern ourselves about is the following. First of all, there is a big emergence right now in an industry where there's really scarce resources, where it's difficult to find good security professionals. Crime as a service has become a thing. It's become a real thing. And actually what happens here is that people that are able to compromise systems, get access to systems, have become a very scarce and really very valuable economy. They've become a very important commodity. And on a lot of the forums, you can actually get access to hackers for hire. And actually, again, as I said previously, these are quite specialist. You'll get hackers that specialize in particular areas. So when you go into one of these deep web forums, you put a job ad, it's literally like a job board, as you would see in the normal world. You check the specific skills you're looking for, a list of candidates will come up, their terms of work, what they will or won't do. For instance, no Russian criminal or hacker will ever hack anything in Russia. It's bad for your life expectancy and for life expectancy of your family. There's like this written code. So they'll say what they will and won't do. You put your text in and up comes a list of people that will do your bidding for a fee. And of course, this is again where the escrow comes into, because sometimes, you need to deposit the money. And once the person's delivered what they said they would deliver, the escrow agent will do the payment crosswise. So now let's look at malware. Now, when I talk about malware is not just one thing. We often think about malware as just malware, but actually malware is a number of things. At its very basic, it can be the old-fashioned virus. What's a virus? It's some program that does something unintended, causes some damage or disruption to your local machine. Okay. It can also be a backdoor. Literally good software that's designed to give somebody access to your system. Now, backdoors could be legitimate software. There's been examples of backdoors in Fortinet, Cisco, Juniper, Palo Alto networks, firewalls, which, given a particular username and password, allow the person full access to the device. So malware could be backdoors. It can be remote access Trojans. What's a remote access Trojan? It's basically a piece of software that gets onto a machine. It doesn't do anything malicious, but all it does, it allows somebody remote to connect to the machine and take access control of that machine. And remote access Trojans are really, really valuable to hackers, because once you develop one that works and is undetectable, you can then use that to get onto machines and sell that access to people. And the people that do sell that access are called initial access brokers. As I said, it's a very specialized ecosystem, but very specific things that they do in a very structured way. Malware could be a wiper. A wiper is something that will wipe information or supposed to cause disruption. Example of a wiper, or semi-example of a wiper, is what Americans and Israelis allegedly did at Natanz with the Iranian enrichment, where the software there was used to destroy the actual centrifuges that was enriching the uranium to disrupt the atomic weapons program of the Iranians. So malware is not just one thing. It could be a number of different things, and different types of malware require different kinds of approaches. The one thing that's important with malware, though, is just there's two things that really is important with malware. The first thing is you need to exploit. Malware generally needs to exploit something within a system in order to be able to run. Okay. And the second thing is malware needs to be delivered. You need to get malware. Malware needs to get into a system. So, which brings me on to our next point. The most common way for malware to be developed or delivered is via phishing. Just good old-fashioned phishing. There's an old saying in cybersecurity, and it's a boring saying, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. And the saying goes something like this. If you give somebody a zero-day exploit, you allow them to exploit a system once. If you teach them how to phish, you teach them how to exploit systems forevermore. Phishing is absolutely still the prime way that malware gets delivered. And in the case of ransomware, if we look at the studies, more than 80% of ransomware gets delivered via phishing emails. An email that comes into somebody's inbox, somebody clicks on a link, or there's a piece of software that somebody opens, and surprising amount of stuff is still macros. We did a study within within the charity sector, and macros and document macros gets used a lot. And malware, most of the cases of ransomware was based on macros. And there's also tools within the deep web which will allow you to create these macros in ways that kind of defeats most of the anti-malware packages like the antivirus vendors. So phishing is still a very, very important part of this. Okay. Now let's get into ransomware. Now, ransomware is a very specific form of malware. So malware is malicious. It's not doing what you think it's doing. It's not doing what you intended to do. And what's the purpose of malware, of ransomware? Of course, in the early days, it was just encrypt your information, because if I can't sell you information because it's not valuable to anybody else, your information certainly is valuable to yourself. So that's one of the early forms of ransomware. Now, there are a couple of interesting things about ransomware, which I just want to touch on, which I'll go into a bit more detail later. First of all, as I said before, there's no honor amongst thieves. There's this belief that sometimes that hacker groups won't target charities, they won't target hospitals, they won't target medical research, and that's not true. Because generally ransomware is indiscriminate. After ransomware attacks hold, very often the hackers, as I'll give you an example later on, might say, okay, you don't have to pay to get the decryption key, but the damage is done. You still have to have somebody to get the systems back running again. So very often it spreads in indiscriminate fashion, but then afterwards it becomes quite targeted. And another thing about ransomware is that there's a lot more repeat attacks than people realize. Half of victims who paid a ransom actually get targeted again. And this is not different to what happens with scammers. If somebody knows they can scam somebody for money, the scammers often sell on that victim's detail to somebody else for other scams. So we see a lot of repeat activity with ransomware. So now, of course, ransomware has developed a lot. It started off very simply, well, let's call it simple, in the sense that it just encrypted data. They then started encrypting backups too, but then the hackers got a bit cleverer. It was indiscriminate initially, but then once they got a remote access Trojan deployed on the machine, they then got onto the machine, maybe deployed some malware there to allow them to get across the network, and started scouting around for information that's embarrassing. This happened to one or two charities where emails were exposed that were really deeply embarrassing to the charities. The hacker groups will also look for evidence of insurance. They look for the quantum of the insurance to see how much the company is insured for. And then, funny enough, very often the ransom is just shy of the insurance value. So it's moved on massively to the point now where that they scout around and they try to cause a maximum embarrassment and try to extract the most amount of money as they can from the victims, depending on who the victim is. So just to talk about the numbers here, the damages are just astronomical. But just to take you back to 2013, one of the first very successful ransomware tools was a thing called CryptoLocker. And within 2 months, CryptoLocker netted the criminals $27 million. I mean, just let's just let that sink in for a second. $27 million in 2 months. And of course, how do we know this? Because one of the real enabling factors for ransomware is cryptocurrencies. Because now, once somebody compromises it or gets some interesting information or wants to share it or threaten to share it, or they need to get payment. And for that to work, for any ransom to work, we all know from watching blockbuster Hollywood movies, you need to have a proper exchange. And cryptocurrencies allows you to do that in a fairly anonymous, very easy, automated fashion. Which is why, if I now look at the figures, this comes from the Financial Times, ransomware is predicted to have damage of $20 billion with a B, 20 with a B billion dollars by 2021, which is just an astronomical figure. Now, the thing to take away from that is if you have this amount of money coming into the criminal ecosystem, it allows them to hire better people, allows them to get more sophisticated, allows them to get access to the best talent, the best tools. And actually, it now means that this industry is, for the first time, since I've been involved, since 1994, actually pays, and it's becoming an industry. So now, I can talk a lot about ransomware, but I want to mention this example because I think there's a few learnings here. What you're looking at here is a bunch of Irish squaddies restoring Windows 7 PCs in the Irish Health Service, HSE. What happened is, they got done with a ransomware attack, and from Conti, the Conti group, managed to get into them. As I said, it's indiscriminate. Conti, not wanting very bad PR for a hacker group, provided the decryption keys for free. But still, you needed to install these decryption keys on every single PC within this health service. And this kind of just makes it real, that the effect isn't just about getting your data back, it's also about getting back into production and the effect on people's lives. And when you look at stuff like this, you realize that this actually is a problem that's here to stay. And if I look at that $20 billion going into the system, this thing will not go away anytime soon. So now, just to give you some other stats around this, so there's a couple of fairly worrying numbers here. If I look at the graph on the left, okay, the bars here reflect the number of attacks that happened within each of those quarters. But then the bit that's even more worrying is the average cost of ransom, the average ransom. And you can see this is the red line here. In 2018, it was tiny, it was like $20,000. Whereas now it's between, the median figure now is $170,000 for the average ransom that's demanded. So the figures aren't trivial. And of course, here again, this is the insurance premiums on the right. I'm looking at the amount of insurance that the insurers are making from ransomware. It's predicted in Europe to be $5.25 billion in 2025. Now, on the right-hand side, this is more interesting for me, is that here we look at the number of brokers, insurance brokers that see an increase in demand for people to buy insurance against cyber insurance. It's driven by ransomware, but it's cyber insurance. It's not ransomware insurance. But at the same time, you also see that they've got a decrease in capacity, which is what's driving the prices up. So insurance for cyber activities, not just ransomware, is becoming increasingly expensive. So what this brings me to now is an interesting point, is that the sad story is that ransomware doesn't just reward the criminals. It rewards insurers, if you think about it. It rewards the companies that create tools against ransomware. So in a way, this is almost one of those problems where it's not in the interest of some people to solve the problem, which is it's a bit of an interesting thought. But what we've seen recently too, which is really, really worrying, is that a lot of the criminal gangs are starting to target employees with a cut of the profits. Between 20 to 40% of the profits will go to the employee of a successful ransomware attack. Now, if the average ransom is $160,000, I mean, that's anything from $32,000 to close to $70,000, which is not bad going. For all you need to do is take a memory stick or click on a link or install a program on your local machine, and then from there onwards it spreads. So this is really about saying that actually people make money out of it. And unfortunately, through human nature, where money's involved, sometimes some people will not do the right thing. So now let's just very quickly look at Wheel of Fortune. I'm about 2 minutes away, and then I'm finished. So if I look at the money, where does the money come from? Okay, so first of all, you need to follow the money, because that tells you what's important. The first thing is, as I mentioned already, there's this notion of monetizing access to the PC. So once somebody has got an exploit or developed an exploit for vulnerability, got that exploit onto the machine and got access to that machine, this is a very important commodity. And to be clear here, this is not just for the place where the ransomware breaks out, but also for a place where somebody might launch a ransomware attack. So access to PCs, even home PCs, and very often with vulnerabilities against home routers, we found this a lot, where people's home devices were compromised and was used to infer the downstream attacks. Okay. Then of course we talked about the marketplaces, the areas where you can make money from selling tools, malware, ransomware, cryptos that will disguise malware so the virus engines don't pick it up, so forth. Of course, we have the macro tools, which I talked about, which is really the tools that you can use to insert malicious macros into documents or scripts within JavaScript, within PDF documents, and so forth. Okay, and this list carries on. And I guess what I'm trying to get to here is that this is a really, really sophisticated ecosystem. It's an ecosystem where there's a lot of money, and it's an ecosystem that's not going away anytime soon with the amount of money that enters into this ecosystem. So now talking about this Wheel of Fortune and all the bad stuff, I guess in a way, ransomware has just become the perfect cyber weapon. Why has it become the perfect cyber weapon? Because it takes skill, and it uses that skill to do transfer of wealth from good people to people with less good intentions, and it's easy to do. You can automate it, you can scale it, as we've seen from the Financial Times things. The money that made from ransomware is growing on an exponential basis. So it's a perfect weapon. It's a perfect way to monetize skill, and in a way, we've not been able to actually do something about it. It's just getting worse. So, and the question is, why is this getting worse? What's the reason behind it? Okay, I think there's a few reasons. Number one, the tools that we use are sometimes overly complicated, difficult to deploy. I think in order to protect against ransomware, people often say you need to get the basics right, but none of us have enough resources to get everything right. People always talk about patching, all the user education, all these different things, but you have to get those right all the time, and it's not as easy to get right as it is. I think also, prioritization of different things one has to do within limited resources is very, very difficult. What do I prioritize? Do I prioritize user education? Do I prioritize patching? Do I prioritize buying more tools? Where should my priorities be in terms of trying to fight against this epidemic? And the key thing to realize here is that ransomware is just a manifestation, a visible manifestation of hacking. It's one that we can track. It's one that we have visibility over, because we can look at the ransoms that's demanded. We look at the blockchain to see how much money flew to the different ransomware gangs. But actually, it's just like a small window into this world of cybercrime. So what would I recommend people do? I think, as a technology vendor that's been doing it since 1994, and I guess like to think I've got a very pragmatic approach about this. A lot of the focus in our industry is on protection. Buy tools, buy firewalls, IDSs, IPSs, SIEM, anomaly behavior tools, you name it, the tools are there. But not enough time is spent on trying to anticipate the threat, trying to identify when this is happening, detecting it, and mostly responding to the threat after it's happened. So I think it's really, really important that one, in a mature cyber defense strategy, balances across these different areas, not just throw money towards the protection side, but also assume that at some stage there'll be an issue. You need to have the ability to detect it and almost certainly be in a position to respond to it, because what time has shown us and what we know for sure is that if you have a proper incident response plan in place, you greatly diminish the cost, and you reduce the impact of any potential attacks. But now, talking about a mature cyber defense strategy and taking about getting the basics right and simplifying stuff, I think that's a fantastic lead into the next slides, with Cristian and with Steve. So I will leave it to Cristian and Steve.
Thank you very much for that, Etienne. I think everyone will agree with me. There's some fantastic insights and in-depth knowledge there around how attackers work, how the threat landscape has changed over the years, and the way the mindset, right? It's important that all businesses now start to think in the way the attackers think and put in the right defense layers in place. I think a couple of people have dropped off from the chat. They're asking if the slides and the recordings be available. So yeah, that will be. But more importantly, Etienne and his team and FSecure, we're quite happy to have a more in-depth conversation about what Etienne's just presented. If that's something people are interested in, please let us know, and we can set up side sessions and that, whether that's face-to-face or remote. Next slide, please. So yeah, myself, Steve Norton, Stuart kindly introduced me at the beginning, but FSecure, just a bit on us. We're a cybersecurity vendor helping businesses stay secure and their data out of attackers' hands for 35 plus years. I've been in the industry myself for 20 plus years, and whether that's in public or private sector. But I now would like to introduce Cristian Alfaro from Save the Children International. Cristian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cristian Alfaro. I'm the Enterprise Technology Manager at Save the Children International. I've been working here for around 15 years now. Yes, quite some time now, and doing different things within Save the Children. But now I'm into this responsibility. So basically, I'm responsible for all the cloud server infrastructure, networks, global networks, and the humanitarian technology. Basically humanitarian response and for Save the Children. I'm based in Guatemala City. Thank you.
Fantastic. So yeah, this session is very much an understanding of where the Save the Children International were. There was a tender release, but I guess, Cristian, if you can explain to everybody the things like the main challenges, what problems you were looking to tackle and how you did tackle that. Why you picked the specific solutions you put in place. If you can talk a little about maybe the success criteria as well. Give everyone a good understanding of that. That would be most appreciative.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. Right. So where should I start then? Good. So a little bit of background. I mean, we're an NGO with around 1,700 endpoints, around 20,000, 24,000 staff. We have presence in 55 countries and over 300 sub-offices around the world. So that gives us a really complex scenario when it comes to security and managing your endpoints. So previously, we had a solution that it was a standalone antivirus. But due to the concerns that this solution had in terms of challenges and concerns that this solution had in regards of data privacy, we were thinking about, we should be changing to a different solution. But then things got a little bit complicated, and our donors came to us saying, please consider using a different solution, because otherwise the funding will be in risk, or will be a risk for you. So then we say, okay, we need to open a bidding process for this. So with that in mind, we opened that around January, February last year, before all this, coronavirus stuff happened. And we started looking at a variety of solutions. We saw around 5 or 7 different products. And in addition to that, as you know, there is this big concern as when you're working for a charity, that budget is a very big constraint for us. So definitely we needed to have a solution that it was basically a centralized solution, because as I was saying at the beginning, we had a standalone installations in all country offices. So can you imagine, so for an operation of 55 countries and over 200 offices around the world, having a standalone antivirus solution there, and without the visibility of what was happening with all the endpoints, if some of them were attacked or not. So at this point, we were blindfolded. So we couldn't see if there is an infection somewhere. And some of our IT colleagues in country offices are very keen to do this and do these checks, but some of them were not just taking this quite serious. So we needed to have a centralized solution that could give us a visibility from a single platform, that it was flexible. And when I say flexible, so again, repeating this, so can you imagine having this kind of endpoints and having to raise a purchase request for whenever there's a country office and they were saying, you know what, we're going to have 15 people coming next week and probably around another 20 next month. So raising a purchase request and following all that procurement process from the purchase request until the accounts payable when it comes to paying the bill. So multiply that for 55. So you can do the numbers. It was a huge workload from various departments. So that's what I was mentioning on flexibility, and of course, as I was saying at the beginning, a cost-effective solution, because of our budget. It's not quite big. So so what was done in terms of the implementation? So once we decided that FSecure was going to be our solution because it met all of our criteria, and we were happy with the approach, especially on how we and the kind of support that we were going to have through the implementation and organizing webinars for our staff, because we had to do the planning first, how we're going to do it. In Save the Children, we're using Enterprise Mobility Suite E3 licensing, which provides Microsoft Intune for endpoint management and to do a software push. So we decided that we were going to do in stages. But then the lockdown came, and that created a different complex scenario for us. So we decided to go, as I was saying, in stages. and we decided, okay, we're going to reach to this number of devices on each regions for this kind of months. And then we started, but for this, we needed to wipe out the previous solution. And by this, then Windows Defender came in, to the front, because there was going to be a gap of time whilst we were, removing the previous solution, installing the new solution. So Windows Defender was going to be our shield at that moment. Then, whilst we were running the wipeout, process, we realized that it wasn't working the way we were expecting, and then we found out that some ISPs were blocking ports, like this kind of residential ISPs, because at this point, all of our staff were working remotely from home. So that brought a different challenge for us. And when we had to say to ourselves, yeah, okay, so we're going to accomplish as much as we can by using Microsoft Intune. So we were able to reach around 80% of all of our endpoints. And then the 20%, the rest, we were going to do manual. So we did that approach. And as of today, we're just a few devices that were left, but then it was a little bit challenging. So it took a little bit more time than we expected because of this situation. However, within a couple of months, I would say 2-3 months, we saw that we reached around 7,000 endpoints, which was really good for us. So, and by this time, we started to see how the dashboard, the FSecure dashboard, was started to populate. And it was amazing to see the amount of threats, the infections, and how these were being, treated. And so far, I can say, as of today, 1 year after, a little bit more than 1 year, we haven't had any problems. In fact, everybody in the IT sector in Cybercrime, we're loving this solution because we have now a visibility of this. And in addition to that, we're getting, as I was saying, real-time reports. The patching solution that we are having with FSecure, it's amazing because, as you know, now with the Cyber Essentials certification, we went through that last year. And one of these things were that the ability of being able to patch all this, the rest of the software that you use as an organization. And by this, I mean Adobe products and any other kind of products that you have installed, you use on a daily basis. So FSecure provides this kind of flexibility, and that you can do it easily. So, having all this said, it's been so far so good for us, how we managed to do the implementation, the stuff that we have now that we didn't have before, and of course now the how easy it is for us to allocate more licenses. For example, whenever we have more people, country offices saying, you know what, I need more licenses, I need 10, 20, 50 licenses, and then I can go to Flow Communications or partners, saying, you know what, we need this kind of this amount of licenses, and then we, on a separate basis, we agreed that we're gonna reach to a certain point of overage use, and then we pay a bill, and then that's it, and then we easily cross-charge the country offices. So that removed a huge hassle from all the areas. So far, if you ask me, we're very happy with the solution, and there's a few key learnings that I wanted to mention or to highlight, which were, if you are considering doing this whilst you are that you are considering, if you're doing this, consider that some ISPs in countries are blocking ports, and that is a yes. And we've seen some countries, especially in Middle East and Africa as well. So and the license provisions, whilst you do your your count, your license count, the initial license count. This is the part where you need to be very careful, because if there are certain people that are not providing you the real numbers, and then when you start doing rollout, they say, oh yeah, you know what, I forgot about these other ones, and then the numbers start changing, and that creates a little bit of problem from the client, I mean, in this case, from Save the Children, and obviously with Flow Communications, because then the numbers changed, invoicing changes at the beginning, because this is the initial state. And then that was, I think that's one of the main key learnings that I wanted to highlight on this conversation. So, yeah, so basically that was it on my side. So I don't know, maybe Etienne, over to you, or Steve, anything that you would like to add in case I've missed something from this?
No, absolutely, Christian. Christian, I would say for sure that the one thing that I see all the time, and I've been doing this for a number of years, is that simplicity always trumps complexity. You know, I've heard this saying so many times that one needs to have a multi-layered approach, one needs to have a best of breed for different things. And okay, my video, yes. I didn't realize my video wasn't on. I've heard this so many times that you need to have best of breed, you know, and belt and braces, but actually the reality is simplicity is easier, less consoles to look at, less areas to focus on, makes life a lot simpler, a lot easier. And ultimately, the thing is that a lot of times the tools also have an attack surface. So by having less tools simply deployed in an understandable way that allows you to make decisions very, very quickly is a way to go. You know, I always think about a nuclear power station. Nuclear power stations have incredibly simple consoles. Why? Because it matters. You know, when the chips are down, when things are simple and easy to understand and deal with, it makes a big difference. I would also say that with the attack landscape way that it is, and with what's going on right now, it's really, really important to be able to answer that question: what will we do if things go really, really badly wrong? I do not think a lot of people think about that, because our natural reaction is not to want to think about bad situations. You know, we do disaster recovery and BCP, but we don't really think about a situation where somebody uncovers a really, really embarrassing part of my network, or gets into an inbox, into something that's maybe into really, really bad stuff that they should not be in, is one of our workers, and could really, really embarrassing. What do I do? You know, and I think people need to spend a bit more time. It goes back to that response area, which then goes into the very first point here that you highlighted, that you need to have a holistic response, not just focus on protection, but also all the other elements of being able to detect attacks, you know, to respond to them in a way, prevent them if you can, and so forth. So, but beyond that, I wouldn't add any more to that.
Yeah, and if you allow me, just a quick comment on that. Yeah, whilst we were, you know, starting to think before we selected or we went through all this process, I was chatting with a couple of colleagues from other organizations and said, you know what, we've been ransomed, you know, we've been hit by ransomware. And I started to hear this, and I was a little bit nervous, to be honest, because then I was, you know, thinking to myself, we don't have the visibility, you know, what happens if this hits certain country office or a finance department, and then all of this, you know, very critical information gets you know, compromised, and then what we're going to do? We're not ready for this. So yeah, that's something that triggered all this, you know, all this process. But yeah, as you mentioned at the beginning, simplicity brings complexity at a certain point. So yeah, it is interesting. So thank you for that.
Christian, I think there's a question here that came up in the Q&A, which is you're probably the best person to answer that question, which is about the patch management solution. You mentioned that the patch management solution was, well, I know what the answer is, but I prefer you to answer it if that's possible.
Sure. Yes. So, okay, so I can tell for the moment, we are within the enterprise technology team, we are a team of 10 people to serve 17,000 employees or endpoints. So you can imagine it's very short, and we feel often like we are doing a lot of things, but it's very challenging, but we like it. So in this case, Microsoft solution provides, I mean, you can do this via Microsoft, but it's not that easy. It takes some complexities. And when we saw the solution from FSecure that comes with the package that we purchased, we say, okay, you know what, this is easier, this is more flexible, you have more visibility on what you're doing, what are you patching, what patches are needed for the endpoints, and then you can easily apply them.
Yeah.
So so we are using FSecure's patching solution as of right now for to do this globally.
I guess if Cristian, if I can just jump in there. So yeah, Etienne, like you said, it's all about understanding the attacker's mindsets, but it's also what happens next. And patching is a key element to making sure that things like Adobe, Java, the attack vectors that the attackers are going after. But yes, as a enterprise organization, we've built a tool. The patching is embedded into it. We do not just Microsoft, but we do third-party patching as well. So, there was a couple of questions around how do you deploy, have you done this, that, and the other. Like I said before, if people are really interested in how, say, the Children International have done this as a global deployment, then we're quite happy to set up side meetings, discuss under an NDA of how, say, the Children did that, and then how Flow and FSecure have supported that moving forward. Stuart, was there more questions?
Yep, we have had a few more questions. First one here from Siv. Were the 17,000 endpoints bring your own device, and was it a zero trust setup from the start?
No. Actually, this 17,000 endpoints are corporate devices on a BYOD policy, and we're trying to avoid that for any work-related scenarios. So because as of right now, the only BYOD we are allowing is mobile devices, but since we're using MDM, mobile device management, with Intune, we have a strict policy for MDM for mobile devices, but we try not. There are just a few ones. I can just no more than 20, I think, globally, BYOD devices in terms of workstations.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So we also have a couple of questions here specifically about Intune. The first being, does implementing Intune first help with the cybersecurity's essential certifications?
Yes, I'll say yes, because we're considering Intune as our the solution to manage the endpoints remotely. So I mean, you can basically tie up policies to our endpoints and to your mobile devices, especially when it comes to security, that you can easily wipe anything that you have there remotely, just with a couple of clicks. So that's definitely something that it's a must to have for this kind of certification. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
Or any other solution, but as long as you can manage your endpoints and they are remote, yes.
So I think that leads nicely on into a follow-up question that we've received from Lindsay. How do you handle the enrolling of devices in Intune remotely?
Oh, that's a different project that took us around a year and a half to run, and we started that journey back in 2019, where we had local Active Directories in all country offices, and then we decided to move everything into Azure Join in scenarios. So it took us a year and a half to completely remove all Active Directories in country offices and move everybody to Azure Join. Moving all the laptops and the desktops to Azure Join. So with that comes the complexity of doing encryption for your endpoints. For that, you need to have certain version of TPM, or you need to have TPM present in the laptops. But at that point, we found out that a lot of laptops were very old and that we needed to remove from our inventory. So that left us a gap of around 85% completion, and then the rest, 50%, the rest we needed to replace those devices. So as of right now, we're almost done on that part, journey that we started back in 2019. But yeah, that was a totally different project that we approached. But for this, I mean, I can comment where I can comment that, I mean, is you could use also FSecure to do software push and to do patching, because we already had a Microsoft Intune in place. We didn't use this module, I mean, or this solution from FSecure, but you can do it as well using FSecure.
Excellent, thank you. We've got one more. Did you move to E3, including utilizing SharePoint or OneDrive? If so, how did you approach governance? No. We haven't done that move yet. As of removing all the complexities that we have right now with, with buying different licensing. For example, you buy EMS E3, we buy apps for enterprise, which is called now, I think it's been rebranded in Microsoft apps for enterprise, which is the previous Office Pro Plus, and then we end up buying Office 365 E3, which provides litigation holds and all this kind of retention policy for your mailboxes. So instead of doing that, we're doing a case study of moving into Microsoft 365 E3. And then that will remove all of this, the need of buying separate licenses for these products, because you're including into one. But we're not going to do that until next year, because we are on the budgeting process for this year, for next year. So that move will be done soon, hopefully by the end of next year. Yeah. Excellent. I do have a question. This one actually comes from myself. I spend most of my day speaking to clients over the telephone that are looking for assistance or some guidance in planning any changes that they're having. Do you have, each of you, a simple tip that an organization can utilize whilst planning any changes to their cybersecurity systems?
We have 3 minutes to answer that, do we?
Maybe something that doesn't come to mind in the usual planning sense that you might hit at some point and go, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, for example, I can bring you the example of Windows 11. That is something that it wasn't in our radar or in the scope yet. But due to recent conversations, we keep a very close relationship with Microsoft, and actually we've been doing a lot of use of Microsoft Fast Track team. We've been doing all these changes with them, so they brought to our attention, the Windows 11 topic, and then we said, okay, you know what? If we are planning to do this, we are in the budgeting processes for the moment. That is something that we need to consider first, because with Windows 11 you have now you need to have TPM2 version 2, I think, and you need to have certain kind of processor, otherwise you'll be left out. And then we went to see our inventory, and I was like, whoa, we are gonna have to do a lot of investment here in changing all of our hardware. So that is where we are right now. I don't know if that answers the question, but yes, so these kind of things that we weren't thinking about came suddenly into our on the desk, and it's trying to make us think, what are we going to do next? But yeah, for example, this is the kind of example that I can use as for. I don't know if I were able to answer your.
That was a great help there, Cristian. We've had just one last question, and we've got about 30 seconds left, I believe. Do the staff have a safe space We don't at our charity.
A safe space.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on what is meant by that either.
Yeah, I'm trying to think something, but I'm not sure. Can we get a little bit more detail on the question?
Yeah, I mean, I think while we wait for the detail on the question, I think there's a question which might maybe for you, Steve, and the question was around the FSecure patching solution. Lindsay asked whether it was proprietary or whether it was a rebadged solution. I know the answer, but I'll let you answer it.
We don't charge for modularize of technology within our endpoint. The patching,
but it's proprietary though. It's developer FSecure, basically.
Yeah.
The answer. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we got.
See that Vicky has expanded on the question, and so they do not need to input multi-factor authentication. So it's a practical question. So sometimes
Sorry, I lost it from what? Can you read that, Etienne?
So, Cristian, the question is, does Save the Children have a safe space? And the safe space definition is a place where you do not need to put in multi-factor authentication. You can just use, just your username and password, or a username and a password to do things. So I think it's a very practical question Vicky poses here.
Yeah, no. As for the moment, we are relying 100% on MFA. This was part of the project that we started back in 2018 that I was mentioning, when we did, the Intune rollout, and also we, enforced MFA on all of our endpoints. Sorry, not endpoints, mobile devices. We haven't done endpoints for the moment, but mobile devices using the Authenticator app, and we're doing single sign-on for all of our applications for the moment. So we have enforced that as right now, and we're there for the moment, and we cannot conceive our lives without that. That's what I want to say.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, I'm aware that we have run over by a couple of minutes there, so I am going to thank all our attendees for attending today. Remember that a recording of this session will be made available to you. It usually takes about a week for us to prepare, but in the meantime, you will receive an email with a feedback form. If I can ask that you just take a couple of minutes to fill that out, it greatly helps us improve our services. Thank you, everyone. And again, thank you to Etienne, Steve, and Cristian for sharing that information with us this afternoon. Goodbye.
Thanks.
Very welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye.